All right, so starting up our webinar here for March, and wanted to talk about a few things about how to prepare coming out of the winter into the spring, and then eventually summer and fall and hopefully for all of us we get to do all that. But so with spring golf, the number one thing that I hear, and I think that's what's most important. I'm not going to talk about a lot of technique today. I think we talk about that enough. Probably more so in certain areas, especially full swing and ball striking, because that's what we're known for. But we could probably do a lot more in short game and things like that, and we'll get into that hopefully here pretty soon. But I do want to talk about the things that when you come out of the winter, we call it hibernation as golfers. It's like the bears that come out of hibernation. Now what do you do? And well, the first things I want to talk about are the problems that you hear about as an instructor, or if you're a player, you're at the clubhouse, and you're like, oh, this, and this. You hear all these problems that the players are having at this particular time of year. Could be different. They are different times of the year and so forth. But in generals, when you come out of the winter, the first thing people may be working on their swings, they may be working on their bodies, they may be working on their minds, they may be working on all those. Don't really know, don't really care. The common denominator, though, at the end of the day, you're going to hear this one thing. As soon as they're coming out of winter and they're coming into spring, is their short game's not right. They're going to hear like, I'm not chipping it. I don't have feel. I don't have feeling in my hands. I don't have feeling in my club. I don't have feeling with the ball. I mean, the ball's not doing what I'm looking for, and what I'm trying to do. I try to hit it 10 yards, it goes 5 yards. I try to hit it 10 yards, it goes 20 yards or 30 yards. It's just I have no feel. At the end of the day, the common denominator is no feel. and so and so I want to talk about why that is, and there's things you can do to make that easier and better. And everybody's situation is different. So we have players in Canada right now that are not even able to play. And, we have players that in Austin, Texas, and in California, certain places in California, they're playing at golf every day. So even in the winter. So it's not like it. Sometimes they're a little bit oblivious to it because they don't get it because they're able to play year round. But when you have a true off season, when I was growing up in Arkansas and playing golf, junior golf and so forth, there's absolutely no doubt. We get rained out. The course you couldn't play. The course would be shut down. And when you did play, you're playing on winter greens, and be snow on the ground for 2 weeks and so forth. And you just can't you can't gain a rhythm, and you have to get away from the physical and really work mentally, like vision and things like that, to get what you're looking for. And that's pretty. Most of our customers, that's in clients, on here are like that. They deal with 4 seasons, and winter is definitely one of them. And then when they come out of it, they think, well, now what do I do? And it's always, it usually takes them about, you always hear like a really good player, it takes about 2 to 3 weeks for them to get their hands back. That's feel. Around the greens, and then you'll hear somebody that doesn't, let's say an 80s shooter that's a decent player, 80s and above, to 85, it takes them maybe a month and a half, because it's just they don't have that feel and sensitivity and awareness. And so what I wanted to do today, because a lot of people are coming into that zone that are on this program, I want to talk about how to get your feel back, and things you can do at home, things you can be aware of, and so forth, that'll hopefully speed that process up. So the first thing I would tell everybody to do, the conditions of the surface are radically different. Now again, it depends on where you're from, but I'm assuming that everybody on here is from coming out of like snow and rain and cold and so forth. So the first thing you have to do is be aware of your conditions. All right. The ball reacts, the club, everything reacts different off of wet surface and dry surface. That's yin and yang, wet, dry. So anybody that's been on here for a long time, if you don't understand yin and yang, it's just opposites, and you can go research on your own through Google with that, what yin and yang is. But the bottom line is that there's yin and yang. All right, you got wet, you got cold, you got wet, you got dry, you got cold or wet. So with that being said, the club goes into the ground and reacts differently to both of those. Possibly good, possibly bad. I don't know. I mean, again, it goes back to yin and yang. The, the, and you have to understand the surface types. The ball is always going to come out faster off a dry land than it will off wet. All right. So in that club, if everything's perfect, you got a perfect world, and you got a TrackMan out there, and you're just measuring chip shots. I'm talking 15 yards, 15-yard chip shots, 20 yards. I don't care. The ball everything reacts different off of wet and dry ground. All right, that's the first thing. All right. So now, with that being said, the yardages will change, good and bad. The trajectory will change. The spin rates will change. All right, everything's going to change. Now, if you add cold into that, now you got, let's say we got wet and we got dry, and then we've got hot and we've got cold. When you take those four things into factor, everything changes. Now, if you've got phenomenal technique and you've been, got and you also have to have experience. Experience maybe trumps that. I'm not sure, but if you tap those two things, you have phenomenal technique, and then you have to have the experience. Because if you have phenomenal technique and you think that you have it figured out, and it's 38 degrees and it's wet and it's obviously cold, and you're hitting off of that and you have phenomenal technique, yeah, you can hit off of it. Your ball, but let's say you trained and you've been training in 90-degree weather and it's dry. The ball is not going to move, and the trajectory, everything from contact, the way it moves up, the spin rates, everything's going to change. So if you don't have experience in that, first and foremost, it's going to change. So you may have the perfect technique, but now you're like, your eyes going, oh gosh, I don't know this. Well, now what do I do? I'm not used to this. That's my point. So it takes both. You have, in my opinion, I've always said this, and I always will say this as long as I'm on this earth, is that there's no excuse for a bad short game. When you pitch a ball from, I don't care if it's 3 feet in front of you and gets your landing point and it rolls down to the cup or rolls up to the cup or just whatever, to let's say 100 yards, and you could even probably go more than that, but you start to run into some of that. I just say 75, make it simple. So from like 3 feet to 75 yards, there is not a player that I've ever coached in my life that has an excuse for not being a master of that if they're serious about the game. Now I'm not talking about if they don't really care or whatever. I'm talking about players that are like dead serious. And I feel like when people sign up on our webinar program and they go through our system and so forth, or anybody's, not mine, anybody's out there, that performance, they're really serious. They're spending a lot of money. They're trying to get really good and so forth. I think they're putting the money, the time, the mental, all. I think they're into it. That's what my point is. Now, with that being said, so we've got a really serious group of golfers, men and women, from ages, let's say 80 down, from 80 to, I don't know, 12, 15 years old. If you can't master the ball from 3 feet to 85 yards, we're not talking talent here. We're talking about technique. There's a major difference. So if you don't have talent, which most people don't, then you master your techniques and you let your techniques take over. And that's why our whole philosophy is based on that. It's based on working a scale to where it should be mastery. Because if I ask somebody on here, if I started off and all of our stuff said, well, really, I'd like to have everybody hit the ball 335 yards in the air, just like the person on the screen here, Dustin Johnson, and that'd be your average. And wherever you're at. And, if you're 90 years old, you need to be able to do it if you're 12. Well, that's silly. But everybody that I've worked with, I can't remember the last person I worked with that didn't have the capability of hitting a ball up to 85 yards. And then say with the wedge, and if you drop it down, say, okay, you got somebody in there that can only hit it 50 with a wedge. I have never seen anybody can hit it 50 yards with a wedge. Now, usually it's bladed and everything else, but I'm just saying if they hit it solid with the miles per hour, so we'll just drop it down to there, 3 feet to 50 yards. Go back to 50-yard shot. That should be mastery. Everybody on here should be Tiger Woods level, when I say that, or Jordan Spieth level. They should be. And the reason why, or not when I say that is like not necessarily today. Their goal should be to master that shot, and there should be no reason why they cannot do it. It doesn't require. It's very little speed. It's a very could be short, could be long. I don't really care, but it's very little speed, and they can't do it. They cannot do it. And so with that being said, if you're not mastering that shot, just like the video says, you're not gonna. There's not gonna be anything that's just like enlightening when you go to a 3-iron off the deck, or a driver off a tee, or a 3-wood off the deck, or 6-iron every time perfect. It's kind of senseless. The one thing that and you start to get into talent in some of those areas, but the one thing that you can control and you have no excuse for is a phenomenal short game, and understanding everything that it requires technically, because that's what you're going to be dealing with. It's all technical. Everybody says feel. Yeah, feel when you hit the ball solid. Now you're dealing with feel, and technique is going to do that. And so that's where everybody should be obsessing over, and so forth. So that's kind of why I went off on that little rant about like how important it is to that you understand that philosophy that I have, because every player that comes to me, I tell every single player that walks into our academy, and our instructors do the same thing because they know how obsessed I am on it. Nobody has the right. They do have the right. Nobody should ever have a bad short game. No way. Period. There's no such thing as the yips. That's a joke. If you buy into that, hey, I don't care. I don't care what anybody thinks, really. I've got what I do, and if nobody likes it, go on somewhere else. But I can tell you for a fact, I have never been able to not cure somebody from the yips that came in. And I've seen people flinch, and I've seen people that have come in with true Parkinson's disease, and they come in and their hands are shaking. That has zero to do with the yips. Everybody says they have the hit impulse. I agree they have the hit impulse. They have the hit impulse because they don't have good technique. Once you fix that, they don't have the hit impulse. All right, hit impulse is, yeah, I don't disagree that it's a brain, the way you're functioning. But when you change the way you move, your brain changes. You can change it either way you want. You can't tell anybody not to have the yips or calm down and do this when they have the yips, whatever you classify that as. But then you get the technique right, it's amazing how the brain calms down. It's really amazing. So no, I have never ever seen anybody that had the yips. Not one person. I've seen them when they walk in have the yips. I have never seen anybody that went through our program that ended up having the yips. That means you can't have the yips. I mean, you might, because they'll say yips. When I say the yips, now you have to realize where I'm going with this. Yips, they say it's not curable. You can't cure it. That's not true. That is absolutely not true. Now you have the mental yips that people talk about, and it's just a label. So first and foremost, you got to realize it's human beings making a label. There's no such thing. There's no such thing as a yip. It mentally or physically. There's no such thing. What people do, like me and teachers and everything, they create a label. Some teacher, which probably really made a huge mistake, I would say Harvey Pinnick would back me on that one, is that he came up and said, that's the yips. Okay, you got the yips. Well, not whoever that was, the player or teacher that said that that's called the yips, and they created a label. Now you got people thinking that they got a label on them. The yips. There's no such thing. So nobody has the yips. That's first and foremost. That's the most important thing you can understand. If you don't have a good short game, there's a lot of things. You don't spend enough time, you don't understand the technique, and you haven't been trained right. It could be, or you just don't have, it's going to be somewhere in that ballpark. But once you learn how to do it, things calm down. The brain calms down because if you are flipping it and yipping at it when it's which is like popping at it, all the yips are, by the way, by definition, is acceleration. So that's why we teach deceleration. So if you understand, if you want to go study it, if you're on here and you feel like you're that person that pops your hands at the ball, and you pop your wrist at it, and there's arm stop and things like that, and so forth. But when you do that, and there's several things factored involved in that, but when you do that, that is not, it's doing exactly what it's supposed to do. When you get the wrist and the arms like they're designed to be, that will not be there. And then when you train in deceleration is the antidote to acceleration, which would be, and acceleration is, you got to remember, the yips come from the back side of the shaft, which is what we talk about. We always talk about the front side of the shaft and the middle section. The back, when you and this comes, again, it comes from the wrist and arm, so I won't get too way out there on this, but when you have early acceleration, the club can't do anything. It has zero energy. It's none. Your wrist and your arms provide that energy. Forget the body. What a player will do is they will kick the head of the club on the back side. If you think of the back of the material, so if you play a cavity back iron, the back side of that club, and that particular area right down there by the shaft and lower part of the club, but that energy gets kicked forward. And the only way it gets kicked forward is through the wrist. And it could be from the elbow, wrist, shoulder. But really, technically, from when you say somebody has the yips, when they classify them, label themselves as the yips, that's where it comes from. It comes from the wrist, and it comes from when you kick the back of the wrist, you early side bend and you accelerate side bend that right wrist forward, or vice versa if you're left-handed, prior to contact. Then what happens is the back of the club shoots forward, and the energy shoots directly into that area because you gave it that energy. And when you do that, that is technically where you putt, whether you chip, whether you hit a golf ball. I don't care what you're hitting. That's what happens. Now, so that's why we talk about the opposite. We go way up higher into the section of the shaft, the lead side of the shaft, up there in that middle section. And it's, if you took the leading or the scoring line on the golf club, that's the side of the shaft that you work all the way up to, and then it's like the middle, little upper middle section of the shaft. But it's right on that scoring line area. And like I said, I'm not even going to give visuals on that right now. We've done so many videos on that. Everybody should know that. But that's why we do it, because when you control that area, you only have one other thing that you have to control, and that's how you're delivering the delivery angle, in to out, out to in, or the feeling of either one of those to get what you need. But that's the energy that you keep. And if you keep that energy, there is no such thing. You can't. It's impossible to have the yips. Whether you have your hands are shaking, or you got a neurological problem, or whatever, it's impossible. So so if somebody tells you got the yips and you think you have the yips, I'll go ahead and say, yes, you do not. You don't have good technique. You don't have the right technique. You have no idea where the energy should be, and you just need to learn it. And you're in the right spot, full swing or not. Now, getting back on track with that, that's important, because when you do have some of those issues, it will affect you in certain ways. You're probably, if you have a flicky movement, on wet ground, you're going to duff it, and on cold or on dry ground, you're going to probably skull it over the green. All right, the ball comes out much slower in wet conditions than it does dry conditions. The ball comes out much different in cold conditions than it does in hot conditions. You even have altitude that people talk about. Absolutely, if you've ever played golf, I've played golf in a lot of different places, a lot of different altitudes, and absolutely it changes. And every one of those makes a difference, and it even makes a difference from 20 yards out. I don't know where that number, you probably get to where the percentage is, it's such a small percentage relative to the yardage. At 10 feet, does it matter? I don't know. I can tell you it does when it's wet and dry. It makes a difference. Altitude, probably not as much. And so in wet conditions, what I want to talk about, I want to start with wet, and then we'll go to dry, and then we're going to talk about cold, because usually typically this is normal. You're dealing with wet and cold, and you're dealing with dry and hot. I mean, that's not always. Don't get me wrong. And we're gonna not get into altitude. I'm not doing that. But we're gonna stay right there, wet and cold. So if you ever watch like college golfers, and now these kids are coming out, boys and girls, are so good when they come out. But if you look at the conditions that they compete in, typically, now this is not always because different schools, different sections, geographically on the map there that we're dealing with, but in general, everybody knows this. When you play college golf, you get really usually wet, cold, and windy conditions. All right. We're going to drop the wind because we're talking about chipping and pitching right now, even though if it's blowing 30, it'll blow your chip shots, pitch shots, or not chips, maybe pitches around like crazy, and it affects the spins and bounce angle. It gets a little wild there. So we're going to drop the wind. We're just going to do it with wet and cold. So when it's wet and cold, like I said, when whether you're a college player or a professional or just a high handicapper, what do you need to deal with? Well, the first thing you need to deal with is like realizing that how much wet we're not going to get. We're just going to say wet, not obsessively, not crazy wet, not where it's just a little bit wet. We're not dealing with all that. Let's just say it's wet. All right, basic wet. Whatever that is. A lot of times you got to realize when it does that, the ball is going to go to the bottom of the surface. All right. It won't stick up like it will sometimes when it's dry and it's a little thicker and it's all that. It won't be this pretty line and all this stuff. It'll kind of melt its way down a little bit. And when it does that, let's just say we're hitting a 15-yard, I don't know, chip pitch. It's because there's an in-between between a chip and a pitch. 15 yard, not even 10 yard. It's 30 feet. You're just taking out. And when they do that, the most typical thing is players they'll play it back in their stance. All right. They'll keep the club square and they'll brush the ground, just like they would in the summertime. And what happens when you do that is, first the ball gets stuck down and it's hit fat. So it's almost like you got to think of it almost like a bunker shot, even though it's not a bunker shot. Definitely not a bunker shot. And I'm not going to say that's what it is, but it's similar. You're in the first stages of that. If you play with a square club face and play it back, and you have your hands forward and your weight on your left side, and that's not even really what we teach on chipping and pitching and all that anyway. We don't zero of that, but most people do. That's what they were taught. No problem. You do it when it's wet. The face is going to come in. It's going to hit it fat, just like you would in a bunker. If you had a square, if you played it back in your stance, you had a square club, and you took it back, and you had a good, normally a good, let's just say you had a good baseline, everything was fine. You're going to hit it fat, and the ball is going to be sticking right in front of you. All right. So then what happens after that is that you're going to try the same technique on the next hole, and you're going to start hitting more up on it, trying to clip it, and then you clip it, and then you clip it, right? And you clip it right in the middle of the ball, and it runs over. And so you start playing ping pong, and then you don't know what to do. And so the technique for that is, the first thing is, you can't look at it. First of all, don't play it back, and don't have a square club face. You need it slightly open. Now, I'm not saying it's weighed, 50 degrees open. I'm talking about the club face 3 to 4 degrees open. And you have to make sure it is actually open. Your stance should be a little bit open as well. Again, not sideways. We're not talking about a bunker shot. But we definitely I'd rather have the club face open than square any day. Too open than square any day. All right? Because you're going to have to use the bounce, and I can't get into all the science of it, and I don't want to do that. It'd be on here for all night. But what I'm just telling you is when the club slides across the ground and it's slightly open, you're adding more bounce to the club, and you're adding an angle where the club can cut. So think about it. If the club is open and it's hitting the ground through the ball, it's like cutting. I'm not talking about cutting across it. It's cutting. It's got an edge to it, a back, where the toe is back. That increases bounce, and it keeps because the leading edge, if it comes in, truly square, conditions are right, it may not kill you. You shouldn't, we don't really want to do that. But if it's truly square, then, in wet surface, you're going to have some serious problems. You're going to be hitting in the same shot again from probably 4 feet in front of you. So we want to open that blade a little bit, 3 to 4 degrees. We want to open the stance a little bit, 3 to 4 degrees. We want the ball middle to, you don't want it way forward and you don't want it back. Left eye is a good one. If you're a right-handed golfer, it's your left eye. Obviously, it'd be the right eye if you're other. So think of your left eye, that ball is launched a direct line in that area. You're a little bit offset to the left, being open a little bit, and you got the club a little open. Now, I don't ever advertise anybody taking the club outside the in, out to in. It's very rare that I ever teach that, even in bunkers. I don't really do a lot of that. The techniques are a little bit, but even if you do, you got to remember remember the conditions we're dealing with. Out to in is better than in to out. So if you have a club open and then you take your club on the backswing inside, your club head gets inside and it goes out. Now you even got all kinds of problems that are about to happen. In probably any condition really, but in general, I can assure you, in wet, now you got major problems. But if you go out to in, let's just say like outside to in, and most people know what that. If you don't, just text me or email me what out to in, and I'll give you a video. I've got a bunch of videos on all that stuff, private videos I can send you what that actually is. When you go out to in, you're increasing bounce again. Bounce, bounce, bounce. You want bounce. So you're increasing the bounce because you got it open, you got your stance open, you got the ball more forward. Everything you're doing so far is increasing, by laws of physics, increasing the backside and the toe side of the club so it doesn't get stuck. All right, and you're increasing bounce. All right, so if you want to make a mistake when it's wet, you go a little out, again, a little outside. It depends on what you do. If you rip it way inside on the takeaway, and I don't know every player on here, so I don't know, but you have to video that, and that's what we always talk about. Watch your club. If it's either the club head's either going in, it's going straight back, or it's going outside. Anything outside and anything that's coming a little bit in is going to help. Even if I don't even care if you're flipping it down to the bottom, and I do, but I'm just saying, like, if you don't even have a really good, grip alignment pointer and that stuff, and you're flipping it and all that stuff, if you're doing that, if you're swinging out to in and you've done those things I've talked about, you're increasing your odds of hitting it, the shot where it doesn't land 2 feet in front of you. Now, and I can't assume how much anybody's going to do anything. You'll have to do that yourself. You'll have to video and you'll have to study yourself, because I'm not even looking at anybody as an example right now. All right. So, but now once that's corrected, once you've got that, let's say you've got those things and you're in a ballpark, you're like, I feel comfortable, man. These angles aren't real radical, and it's like, this looks pretty clean. It starts to get better. All right. Now you're having to deal with speed. And even though we talk about deceleration, this would not be a good time to decelerate. Deceleration first and foremost. So this will hopefully answer a lot of people, because I get a lot of questions. Why do you teach deceleration? There's no such thing. I'm not teaching deceleration. What deceleration training does is it teaches you to, if I draw let's see if I can get, I probably need to do a face on here so you can see it, but let's say I've got Dustin Johnson here. I will give you a visual. What deceleration does is it doesn't make you load that side of the shaft. It does not. This is where all the energy is going through right here. This is where it's loaded. All right. He's got the shaft pointed exactly where it needs to be pointed. You can't see the face, and that would make a difference. Understand where that side of the shaft, but he's got it. It's perfect. All right. And he's hitting like a 83-yard wedge shot. But this is where all the pressure is in here on this side. You have to remember, this is the leading edge is right there. All right. So right here, he's not using anything down here energy wise. He's using everything up in here. Here's that crosshair I talk about. All right. So when you do that, that's going to create a tremendous amount of pressure. And you keep that. He's going to keep that all the way until the club hits the ball. And when he does that, that's going to, create a tremendous amount of pressure and so forth. And when you go back into the short game and so forth, that's what you want. You want that pressure in that shaft. No, it's not. When I say pressure, I want to back this off. when you go over here, if he was casting this club, and most people know what casting is, you can't cast. The club doesn't cast itself. No, nothing does. The club doesn't do anything. It's what you do with your wrist and your arms, and your body does make a little bit of difference. But in general, it's what you're doing here. But if he was casting that, that means on this other side, way over here on the back side, I can't get over all the way to it, but on the other side of the shaft, and then way up here, that's what's getting kicked because of the wrist and the arms, because of the right wrist extension. So it would go back to right wrist extension, and also right wrist side bend could be also involved in that. All right. If you don't know what those are, just email me, so forth. So when you train deceleration, it starts to load that section of the shaft that I'm talking about. So when you're training, not swinging, there's a lot of different ways to do it. You can there's a lot of, it's technically, because what's being measured as far as acceleration, deceleration of the player is up here in the club head. It's like, oh, the club went 150 miles an hour, or whatever. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about like true acceleration, deceleration of this in reality. Now in training, I want the club head to slow down. I want the club head on the downswing when you're training your drills to slow down radically on your downswing in training. Because when you do that, this thing you got right up here, your brain, starts to go, like, oh, I can feel it kick in. I can feel it doing this. I can feel it doing that. And so you start to become aware, and then all of a sudden, you'll start to be able to know where I'm not containing the pressure of the shaft, containment, or I am. Or I've got an awkward delivery angle out here, or I've got an awkward delivery angle over here. It's about awareness. That's what that's all about, internal awareness. That's why I teach deceleration. And so when somebody goes to accelerate through the shot, you're not this is not an acceleration point. I better not be in your mind. If it is, that's fine. You're not going to be any good, and he wouldn't be there if he was that. It would not a player on the tour in the world that would do that. They're not accelerating this. They're not accelerating their bodies and all this stuff like people think. Those are the two things that everybody thinks. They're going to spin faster this way, and they're going to swing this thing way faster on acceleration. Technically, there would be truth probably in both of those. I mean, if you look at it from if you just measured it, that's the problem. People are measuring this and this speeds and body speeds and hits. That's not what they're doing. When Jack Nicklaus used to say, when his backswing, he used to make his backswing slower to hit it further. That's because he's generating more torque. He even kept his downswing. He said the first 6 inches on his downswing were far slower when he was trying to hit the ball further. That means downswing. That means the club's going back towards the ball. It was slower the first 6 inches. That's deceleration, folks. And so what that does, but even with all that being said, you're still dealing with either fields and you're dealing with measurements and stuff like that. What in actuality, if this pressure right here is correct, you get the side of the shaft right, and you've got, let's just say everything's right. You got the delivery angle right and everything else. You got the delivery angle the way you want it and so forth. Great. You keep that. You can accelerate the hell out of this area. All right, that right there, you can accelerate that thing, get as much of it as you want, and the good thing is you have control over it. So if you go and I just want to accelerate it 1 mile an hour, or I want to accelerate it, if you have the capability of doing it 125 miles an hour or 150, wonderful. That's fine in your mind. I mean, you're not going to accelerate this part of the shaft 125 miles an hour. I'm not saying that, or 150. I'm just saying in your mind, your intensity level could be whatever it is, 1 to 10. That doesn't matter to me. You keep it there. So if you contain that and you're using this as far as acceleration, say like Jason Day. If you watch Jason Day pitch the ball, he got a lot of acceleration. He has none of this. The club's being accelerated here. This gets accelerated, but this is where the control is from. That's the control. You can accelerate that. That's in your mind. Yeah, it's your mind. This is what you want to accelerate, not down or up or anything over, not cast at this. You just contain it, but you can accelerate that. And so when I go back to what I'm talking about, I'm going to go back again and talk about when you're hitting off the wet lie, because that's why it's important. When I say acceleration, I'm never, ever, ever, you never think about accelerating that. That gets accelerated through your training, which are your wrist and your arms. And if you have your wrist and arms correct, like we're talking about, like in our training, that club, the side of the shaft will get accelerated right there. Through that, the club head gets accelerated, yes. And through that, you have club face control, and you have shaft control, and you have delivery control. Not through acceleration there, but because the acceleration is a little bit, the delivery angle is not the same. So I can't say like if you accelerate, if you have the pressure here perfect and you have this correct, I can't say that you're going to have the right delivery angle. That would not be true. But I can tell you that I'll take my odds on anybody. If you get this section of the shaft correct and you learn how to pressure that shaft, not slow or fast, either one is the same. You can decelerate if you have control of this side of the shaft. You can decelerate. You can decelerate, not on wet ground, you don't need to, but like if you're playing a US Open, that's what they do. Watch them go play in that thick rough and watch what happens when that club hits the ball. That club starts to really decelerate in there. It's a different angle. That's what I'm talking about before. You got a different angle. But you watch them. You watch them off dry ground, or not dry, but like, kind of like when it's short grass or whatever, and they've got to nip one and they've got to hit it 3 feet and stop it. Watch that club come into the ball. That's not accelerating. The club's decelerating. And the only reason why it is because and they can get away with it. If you were decelerating it, if you were decelerating this, yeah, that's the one that flips it over the green and plays ping pong or duffs it or whiffs it or whatever. But these pros, they decelerate it and accelerate in this pressure zone right here, never here. Whether they know it or not, it doesn't matter. It's a fact. I don't. Not a debate on that one. So that's why it goes back to why it's so important to understand, like what I'm talking about with acceleration, because I brought it up with wet ground. You're gonna say, well, everything's taught with deceleration. Yeah, that's training. And why do we do it? Now you don't. So when you hit off wet ground, if everything is good to go, we've got our face open, our club, this, we're all good. We're going outside in, where everything we're doing is adding in. You have to add not more pressure, but more acceleration in this shaft part that you've been working on. And it's not that long a swing either, by the way. But in general, you know what I'm talking about. If you're hitting it 10 yards, I can't tell what it'd feel. If everything's normal, it may feel 15 yards. It's like a bunker shot. There's no way anybody could ever say, like, you got a 10-yard bunker shot, short-sided. You got a 10-yard bunker shot. Nobody could ever write a book and say you got to hit it. You got to feel like you're hitting it 17 yards. And I'll tell you why, because the conditions is one. You play West Texas sand, and that thing's hard pan sand, and you play in wet. You're in Alabama, and you're playing there, and it's just wet, or Florida, and you got that fluffy sand just there. That is not the same. It's not the same, and your entry into the sand it gets a little complex. I probably shouldn't go into all that. Bottom line is, it's not the same. Your feeling is not the same. It's always going to be further though, and it's wet. When it's wet, your feeling of hitting the ball wherever your natural target is, it has to be more. Even in a 10-yard shot, it'll have to be if it's wet. And cold. We'll get into cold here in a little bit. But so hopefully that helps you. Now, if you take everything that I just said about all that, it'd be opposite on dry except for the club face. The club face you can get away with if it's dry ground. You can get into, I never liked the club on the ground square, chipping or pitching. It may, and a really elite player will have it, it sounds crazy, but a degree or two open. Now, it's not 20. It's not laid back sideways, but you never, ever really want the club truly square unless you got a perfect lie and you're not hitting like a sand wedge. When you're hitting a sand wedge off the ground and it's dry ground, you definitely not wet. But if it's dry, you can. It depends on your technique and what your delivery angles and pressures. There's a lot of things going on there. But I just never really like it 100% square unless I'm hitting like an 8-iron bump and run. Then I will get it. Actually, I'll keep it square there, and I've got a perfect lie, no deep grass, no in a hole or anything like that. Any awkward lie, I believe this goes with anything. anytime you have an awkward lie around the greens, awkward being in deep rough and or think of it as like a hazardous lie, not in a hazard, but or kind of in a really tight, really into the grain, like weird, it's wet and sandy and weird, like you're like, I don't know what to do. Always have the face open, always have your feet open. Always. And don't play the ball way back. It depends on the shot. If it's really you don't want to play it that far. A really great player doesn't have to play the ball back as far as it's so over exaggerated. It's such a big misconception as far as playing in short game, playing the ball way back off your right foot, you know, keeping your feet so close together and then turning them to the left and all this stuff and hands way forward and get all your weight on your left side. There's not a pro in the world that does that. And all you got to do is refer to, there's a video Paul Azinger talks about it, short game. If you watch all of it, it was on the Golf Channel, and it's really one of the only players I've ever, uh, you know, you can't see everything out there. I try to keep up a lot of what's going on and people saying things like this and that, but I pay way more attention to professional, like people that play for a living that have won major championships. I listen to what they say way more at this stage about um, techniques than I do some guy that's trying to make a living like I am. I just don't. I mean, I've been around it so long that that's not what gets it done for me. I want to hear people that have been in these crazy wild conditions and have been out there. And he is very, very, very intelligent. Paul Azinger, as far as, golf smart. He's got a lot of really good things that he talks about in short game. And that was his number one thing. I've been saying it forever. I mean, it's on our original videos talking about the leading edge versus the middle of the club and the back of the club. Now, TrackMan's come out and said, yeah, they don't use the leading edge. They don't do this. Now they've got enough data. I was teaching that before they even got started on that jump. And it's not. When people talk about bowing their left wrist and all this stuff, it's not. No, you don't want to dig the club in the ground. It's not what you're doing. And matter of fact, you're using more the middle to the back of the club with forward lean, but then you have to have delivery angles and it gets a little wild and stuff like that. But that was my whole point. If everybody could just bow their left wrist, yeah, or bend their right wrist at impact, and that was what makes it work, there'd be so many great golfers that you don't know, but none of it never worked. And there's a lot of reasons why it didn't, and so forth. But that was kind of our whole point with that. So getting back on point is if you watch Paul Azinger talk about short game, first thing he talks about was when you get on the tour, nobody plays the ball back, nobody puts the hands way forward, and nobody leans on their left side all the way to hit a chip and pitch. Nobody does that. It's silly. It's Mickey Mouse Club stuff. Silly. It really is. I mean, when I say Mickey Mouse Club, it is Mickey Mouse Club. And this is coming from somebody that used to teach that stuff because that was what was taught all the way through. And I'm not blaming anybody else. That's just what people did. They didn't know why you do that. It just made you think, well, if you jam the club in the ground, it may hit the ball forward, and you might hit the ball first and in the ground. That's not what you should be trying to do. It causes more yips, if anything, in my opinion. Where people are talking about classical, you want to label yips, like we go back, that creates more going that direction, absolutely 100%, than it does playing the ball forward, and hands not as far forward at address, and everything basically opposite of what they're teaching. So, there's a time and place for it. There's a time where the more you play that ball back, the more you better have that club a little bit more open, and the more you better stance better be more open. Everything you better be countering that thing. You better be swinging more left to your target, your intended target line. You're because you're creating some really offset weird angles, and you're getting about to get the club stuck in the ground is what you're about to do, the leading edge, and that's death zone. If you're a mountain climber or a mountaineer, you're in this death zone. That's what they would call that. That's what I call it for that. That club, you don't have to open up a whole lot, but you need to be a little open, and you don't play the ball way back. You might play it a little bit off center. Again, left eye. Very few shots in golf that I ever have to play, in the short game behind my nose, so to be my right eye. If the ball is off my right eye, I'm trying to think of a shot, where I would really even do that. Even on a berry line, a bunker, I don't even have to do it there. I mean, there's styles and shots, a steep and stab shot, you don't have to do that. So I don't even really know. There might be some where I would really do that, piddling around. Um, I don't know. I just can't think of any. You don't see it on the tour either. You just don't. Watch them chip around. Watch them in their ball position, where they chip the ball out. In reality, when the money's on the line and pitch the ball, it's more up forward. The hands are either level or a little bit leaning, just a couple degrees, and so forth. Because you add leaning the shaft. You can lean the shaft 30 degrees at address and have it 30 degrees backwards at impact, behind when you hit. That is not what it is. And then again, like I said, you get the leading edge jammed, you're done either way. You don't want to hit it hands way forward. And anytime your hands are way forward, your directional angle through the shot with your hands has to be more left, and you have to have the club a little bit more open for bounce and protection. So just remember that. And if you don't understand that, just ask me a question. We'll deal with it next week. So that, I know it's a lot of stuff that I'm talking about, but I can promise you, if you study and research what I'm talking about, use your own eyes, use your own observation. Go to I don't know the link. I'm not going to send it to anybody with the Paul Azinger, but it was a great show. Because on the Golf Channel, it was with Brandel Chambly. They were just had a deal talking about short game, and very few things I really just go, wow, that was awesome. Another thing that I did was a pause drill. We had three great players one time on the Golf Channel. Those were the two that really stand out to me that I thought. And like I said, I always pay attention. Doesn't whether I listen to it or not, that's on me. But a lot of times I've already heard it a million times. It's the same lick, on the guitar. I've heard it a million times. I forgot it, as much as I heard it. So, but two things. That was one of them. That one really caught me, and I thought, man, that's really good stuff. That's legit. And then the other one was I had three tour players giving golf lessons. One was Raymond Floyd, one was Greg Norman, and Nick Faldo. And they asked them the only three, because I wanted to listen to all. Like I said, I listen to tour players. That's what I buy into. I buy into tour players. I don't buy into BS bullshit. I don't buy in. You come out with a new fad, good, great, whatever. I don't buy into machines either. I buy into real players. I'll look at all of it and I'll measure it up and all this, but I'll buy into the numbers on TrackMan. TrackMan makes nobody great. Players make TrackMan great. You have to realize the difference. TrackMan is legit. I'm not saying it's not. There's flaws in it. Talk to engineers, 100%. There are flaws in the system. They will tell you that, and I'm not going to get into all those today. I can bring in an engineer to talk about it maybe on a webinar, but it is not 100% accurate. The ball readings are really, really, really close to being accurate, but the actual readings of the clubs, how it's marking the club as it starts its downswing, and what they're reading, what the TrackMan is actually reading, is not accurate. It reads to in to out first and foremost. And so when it rings to in to out, it's also reading a different angle of attack. It has to. And so we can get into that to a different day. But it's not like it's radically off. I'm not saying that. The ball data is pretty right on. The club data is not. And that's important, because what my point is you're reading club data. If you're going and doing TrackMan, you're swinging. It's missing so many different variables. It's ridiculous as far as principles of striking the ball. So great players make TrackMan, not vice versa. Okay, so that's my little take on that, and whether you believe it or not, don't really care. But there are some good things. Once you get your swing to a certain level, you get your fundamentals and your forms to a certain level, absolutely it can come in and it can help you, especially if you know its flaws. And all these players like Dustin Johnson, they know their flaw, they know its flaws. And with that, they can calculate, what they need to do with the swing to counter that. So sorry about that. But there was a question on here. Hold on one second. Somebody wrote a question. Jim, did you have a question or something?
I just sent you a link to Face On Swing if you wanted to look at it after the webinar. I don't know what your time's like.
Is it your swing? Is that
Yes.
your swing? Okay, yeah, we'll do it. We'll try to do it on here. So Now, with all that being said, that's a really good video with going back to Pollinger. It's one of the things I've talked about for a lot. And there's a lot of great coaches that know this too. It's not something that's like I'm the only one. Not saying that at all. You get to the upper echelon of coaches that really get what's going, what happens around short game. They will tell you 100%. This is not going against the grain. It's going with the current when you're around the best instructors. So this is not. I don't want when I say these things. When I'm talking about short game and all these things about how you use the club and the stance and all this stuff. That's not. You get the upper echelon. You go spend $5,000 with Butch Harmon an hour. Yeah, he's going to tell you the same thing because they understand. They're around these players, and when you're around these great players, they're not doing a lot of the things that the old textbooks say. Ball back around the short game, this, and all that stuff. So now, with that being said, I want to get right back. I'll try to get back on track here. Hopefully, you can piece this information together. You might have to listen to it a few times to get what I'm saying, but everything I've talked about here today has a purpose. You don't have to piece it together and watch it. That's up to you, not me. But I'm telling you, everything I'm telling you here, if you pay attention and you start applying it, you will start to improve drastically your short game and understand how that club's designed to be used. Because every tool has a job and a purpose, and they're not all the same. There's different links. Even if you do the one link swing, everything's different. Every club has a purpose, you know. So, and you got to use the right tool for the right job, and you better know your tool, you know. So don't use a hammer when you need a screwdriver. So now we've talked about now when it gets hot and cold. So we've talked about the wet and the dry. For the most part, dry is going to come out. The ball's going to, if everything's perfect. I mean, or let's just say good, technique's good and everything else. If it's not good, I can't really help you there. You have to improve your technique, and we can get into that, into either individual or whatever and so forth. But if everything's good, ball comes out on wet ground slower. Bottom line, it'll come out higher. All right. It also come out with less spin. So you say, well, how can it come out higher with less spin? Because they're two different things. Trajectory and spin rates are different. All right. So, and then when it comes out on a dry ground, same technique, the ball is going to come out lower. It's going to come out spinnier. It depends on its style too. I mean, I'm talking about chip and run. I'm kind of should classify that a little bit more, but kind of low chip pitch or whatever. It's going to come out lower and less spin and so forth. So it'll faster. So your feel is going to change. So a lot of times when people ended the season the year before, they had that feel down. They had more of a harder, a faster type of feel down, and then now they're coming back into one cold conditions, and then you got wet and this and whatever. So the ball changes and all that. When your hands are cold, that's the last thing I want to touch on, because that when your hands are warm, it's not even a conversation. If your hands are warm, you can't hit a chip shot or pitch shot. That's your fault. Your technique's not right. But when it's cold, you see it on the tour, and their hands are cold. It's not the same because you're not dealing just with your hands. You're dealing with your brain and your body. You're dealing with like being uncomfortable and things like that. So your technique could be the same, and being cold could be the distraction. And again, I'm just assuming everything is right here. So that factor is really important. So I'm really big on like keeping hand warmers, gloves, everything you can. It's not being a sissy going out there and keep your hands warm. I'd rather see somebody go out there and be in a tank top. Well, I shouldn't say that playing golf, but short sleeve shirt when it's 38 degrees, toughen it out. But they've got massive gloves on, their hands are warm. And the reason why I'm saying that, your body being cold and toughen that out, that's wonderful. Your hands are cold, it's different. I don't have all the science behind it, so I don't even want to start into all that. I can tell you the science I do have is, let's see, about 39 years of playing golf. And I can tell you when your hands are really, really cold, you're literally actually playing with fire. It's weird to say that, but you are. And so you don't need to do that. You need your hand. You keep those hands warm. You always should keep your golf ball. When you work, when Gary played, he keep it in his pocket. He had warmers back in his pocket. He talked about it. He always liked, because that was back in the old days, not Florida, when he played those real cold British Open conditions, he'd keep that golf ball up there as warm as he could the whole entire time from the time he left the green to the next tee, because he believed that changed the conditions of it. It does. It absolutely does. So any advantage is an advantage, as little as it may seem. So keeping those hands warm though are just crucial. Um, that to me is being uncomfortable as far as, or just being cold. That's not really too big a deal. I mean, people freak out about it, like, oh, I'm cold, I'm whatever. But if you grew up in the north, you've been around cold conditions. Those players, that's not a big deal to them. But even those players, when you get into those extremities and you get into those fingers and they might be cold and their hands are cold, there's a stiffness to it and there's an awkwardness to it, and you lose that silkiness and that softness of what you need, in my opinion, around the short game. And so I think that is really important. So I don't even want to talk about the hot weather on that. I don't think it's relevant, other than, well, it would be as far as health. I mean, if you can talk about, your head and keeping your body cool and all those things, that does matter, but I'm not going into that today. So just remember those conditions: wet, cold, wet and dry, and then the cold. Those are some things that you can start to think about to help improve it. If you know your technique's right and you don't have the right feel, think about it a little bit and apply some of these things, and you should be good to go. With that being said, and again, that applies really even with full shots and all that stuff as well. But this is really want to talk about short game and working on your short game as much as anything. Working on your short game at this time of year, really develop, be creative, just work on it and start to develop it first, because it probably is going to be off. These will give you food for thought, but start developing it, because you're running into the season now. And if you're in a place where you can't even hit, snow's on the ground, no problem. Just go ahead if you can go out to your facility where you can hit some of those indoor domes, go out there and work your hands. Start hitting different types of shots: low, medium, high, everything in between. And I like to tell people one thing as well for training is to take out their highest lofted wedge. So it'd be like if you have a 60 degree, and I can't, again, clubs may not be fitted right. I don't really know, but like on wet ground is practicing with a 60. And the reason why is it's more practicing, training with a 60, practicing with that, because it'll usually get more stuck in the ground because of the amount of bounce it actually has and so forth. And the leading edge is usually a little bit stickier and so forth, or sharper. And so it'll be harder. And you have to kind of learn how to use the club better. And it would be more about experience. As much as anything, learning about it. And then when you play, use the right tool for the right job. Use what you need, use what you hit best. But in training around the greens and on tough lies and things like that when it's wet, really work with a really high lie. Because if you can get that club really good from say distances of 5 yards to 25 yards, and you get really awesome at that, everything else will be easier. It's more like a skill set and a challenge than it is anything. Odds are, depending on the player, you'll have a lot of problems with that when it's wet. So I don't recommend always using that. It's not what I'm saying. Just train with it. You get that right, things start to get easier for you. All right. With that being said, I'm going to open up for questions, and then we'll bounce. Jim, you had a swing up here, right?
Yeah. There's in the thing I gave you there's a link.
Okay, cool. I'm gonna pop it up and that way you can take a look at it. You usually always have slow motion on here too, right? There you go. Getting over your left side really nice now. Batter thoracic late. You kind of do it late. Yeah, that's good though. It kind of starts off. There's some shifting, and you kind of it would bother me. It doesn't bother me. What actually I see a lot of good here. I mean, like you kind of shifting. You're right in this area. Kind of starts to move out your right side, but then you kind of lock back. It's similar like Katy Perry does that. It's not the same, but it's similar. And it kind of locks back in transition, so it's really actually not really a problem. Yeah, so one thing I see here is your right arm as far as in transition. Now, the video is not quite clear enough for people to see, but this, when you're in here, I'll try to draw it and we can talk about it later. It's a tricky one to talk about because it's hard for people to understand. You would want to take this lifeline and wrench that back over here this way. That's not going to work. That's not good enough color. Hold on a second here. You want to take this right lifeline first of all, right here, and you want to try to take that right lifeline and wrench it back this way, back that way. When I say wrench it, well, think about it like this. Now you're definitely not rolling it over. You want to roll it back like that. Your right lifeline. See, it's almost like if you pressed your thumb, you took your right lifeline, because right here it's vertical. Because if you just thought of your thumb where I could barely like you can see your thumb right there. If you think about it, if you wrenched it back, what I'm talking about, like this way, think about that way, not longer. That's not a good version. I'm trying to do this. If I didn't see your thumb straight up and down, because I can see it, it's up in the air, it's cocked, but it should be more sideways. It should be like more in line with the shaft here, almost in line with the shaft. It's not. I can see it's above the shaft. That right thumb should be. The shaft wouldn't change. The rotation of the shaft would, but the up and down movement would not change. But your right thumb should be more in line with that shaft angle. Does that make sense? If you took your right wrist, I don't know if you're still on here or not, but if you took your right wrist and you just, you can't do it with the wrist would be affected by the arm, but it's rotation of the arm, not over. That's for sure. It's back.
Okay, I think
if you took vertical, like it's
does it seem like
shaft,
does it seem like
more vertical?
Does it seem like
the shaft?
Okay, does it seem like it might be a function of where my right elbow is?
No, the elbow has nothing to do with it. Elbow is going to stay flat. Elbow has nothing to do with the rotation. So elbow is only flexion and extension. Wrist, you remember, wrist have nothing to do with rotation. Wrist can't rotate. So the only thing it can rotate is. So when you rotate the arm,
I know that, but
yeah, just get your right wrist.
I'm sorry.
Right wrist. Get your right thumb in line more with that shaft. You can see it right here. Like if you look at the angle of your shaft, your thumb is above that. I mean, you can see it. It's like more vertical. Yeah. And you might not be able to see it. Maybe I can just see it look at so much video, but I promise you it's vertical. If that's down the line, I promise you that's vertical relative to the shaft, your thumb. And that's rotation. That's not like That's not like you're opening the club or anything like that. You're closing it relative to the same angle. But what a lot of times what'll happen when that's through arm rotation, not through, there's no face, doesn't do anything. But when you do that, a lot of times then the people will kick the club back steeper when they do that. So you have to be careful with it. But the right arm has to work more internally. And when it does, that thumb will get right back in line with that side of the shaft, and then you'd be way better. It would be and it should be happening right in, and you can do it late in the swing. I mean, you can do it all. I mean, you do some of it down at the bottom. That's why you're hitting the ball really good and stuff. I mean, you're doing it, but you're doing it really late. You're putting a lot of pressure on getting that right at the ball, and you're probably dealing with not having really good angles through the ball, because if you made the move I'm talking about, your angles through the ball would be really clean. You wouldn't have to really think a whole lot about it. It would just be there because it's happening. You want it to happen a lot earlier, in my opinion. But the body, in general, is moving. It starts off. It's similar. It's not exactly like Kenny Perry, but it has a lot of the same types of things. It's like it kind of shifts a little bit, doesn't do much, then it shifts. And then all of a sudden you get torqued up, and that's really good because you get really torqued there really late, and that's about, you don't need more than that. And if you even see here with your thumb, if you can, I'll try to blow that up. If you see there, even with that thumb should be not that vertical. That right thumb, that's the best way I can explain it to you right there. But your left wrist is
Okay.
actually really good. It's not your left wrist, but you should be shutting that lifeline. I shouldn't be able to see that thumb right there. I should not be able to see your left thumb. And the only way you would do that, and you can, I'm talking about visual, we're talking about reality or whatever. I'm saying if you took your right lifeline and shoved that in there and closed that down at the top of the swing right there and kept it there, that's what I'm talking about. Now, the function of how that actually happens through, biomechanics is not that. That's not visual. It's what happens is internal rotation of the arm. But
Yep.
your mind, if you just thought of where you didn't let anybody see that thumb. So if next time we looked at this swing and you're in transition and I can't see that, or when you're looking at your own swing, if you can see that thumb right there, you don't have it right. You should not be able to see that thumb.
I get you.
Now,
I can see exactly what you're saying.
that's what I'm saying. Like, so when your club is down, let me break it down. So when your club is getting down lower, that is staying the same. So when you get down here, that's the same as that look you saw there is the same thing there. So now that look changes down by the ball because you can't hit it from right there. If that was here and that club came straight down, it didn't change through, say, rotation or manipulation and all that stuff. And you can dang sure do it because you're doing it. If you hit it like that, the ball would go. It would be vertical. I mean, it would be like a flop shot. So your goal would be, and you don't do that. I know that and that's the beautiful thing about we can manipulate and you can do this in a lot of, you don't, and again, I could have somebody send me 1,000 videos of tour players that might be that you can see their thumb here. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying that people don't. I'm saying they can do it in a lot of different places. What I'm saying I would really like to see, because I don't see a lot of players, there's a few, but when they get down in here and that position here that you have here is exactly the same. If you get up to the top and you hide that thumb and you keep it there all just like you're doing all the way through the shot, you're gonna start dealing with your timing is going to improve drastically. Your flight of your ball is going to be very penetrating, and you're not going to feel any rotation of that clip through the ball. You're going to not feel like you're holding on, and you're not going to feel like you're rotating it. It's going to be just really, really smooth. So that's what I was saying there.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, because I feel like I'm adding timing. I feel like I have to do things, that I don't want to do. And I had my own ideas about it. And this tells me how to get to where I think I need to go. So thank you.
That's probably a better visual is looking at it like that. I always know what I see because that's what I know what I see it, how we translate it. It's hard because you got one is a visual feel, which is always like Harvey Pinnick was the best that ever did that communicator, and then you've got like science or biomechanics that says this is how it has to happen. It doesn't happen through this or that. A lot of times, really, as a player, the other one is always better, like a visual. But so where it really comes from, science-wise or whatever, I don't really know if that makes a whole lot. But if you could hide that, if you show another video, maybe next session, next week when we do this, if you could see it where we saw your lifeline into that thumb and we couldn't see that thumb, and it was and you maintain that just from, if you just had it there like that and to here, that far, that zone right there, those two things, man, that would be really good. And
Perfect.
you have to look at the angle of steepness relative to that as well. You have to respect that. So I'm not doing down the line right now, but if that'd be good. So a great tip for anybody on here is to see what I'm showing is you can look at that right there. If I can't see that thumb, that doesn't mean you're going to be a tour player. That's not what I'm saying. It just means that you've got a really good advantage. Now you have to respect the steepness. Remember, that's down the line. It would be steepness of the shaft. So this would be over the top down the line. This would be steep, and then this would be more shallow and everything in between all that. So if I couldn't see that thumb, the biggest problem you could have is if you were steep. If it was steep like that, then we could tell you how to change the angle of that thumb. You keep the same thing. The thumb would still stay the same. That look would stay the same even if you were steep. We would just teach you how to change that angle to make it more offset longer. And when you get that, and I know you're swinging. You don't really are. You're not steep anymore. You're not like you got a little. I mean, when I say steep, vertical. You're not vertical at all. So I know if we get that angle change or that rotation change, get that hidden with that thumb, you're going to be really striping it. So.
And Matt, when we're talking about steep, we're talking about more like in through the second stage of transition.
Yeah, because it changes, right? I mean, it can be like steep starting down, and then it starts to deflect away. Like I mean, like Gary Woodland does a lot of that. Like he kind of gets steep starting down, and as it comes out like midway down, it starts to break away. Mickelson does the same thing. So some people are steep coming down, like they jerk the club down and get narrower. Usually those things, two things go together. When they bring the club down, it gets narrow. When you see somebody get steep, it's usually the wrist kind of break towards vertical. But then they'll start to deflect that away, and how they do that deflection is through arm rotation and wrist bend. And so whether they know it or not, that's what I mean. If you just measure it, you're not talking in like visuals and all this junk. If you just measure it, that's what's going on. And so right wrist bend or back wrist bend, whatever you want to call it, and then internal arm rotation at the same time, and then that will deflect that shaft. And that's kind of like you kind of have it a little bit maybe steep starting down. It's not that steep. There's a lot of players a lot steeper than that, and then you definitely don't have it steep halfway down from what I've seen videos you sent me.
Yeah, I kind of rock out of it. I get a little Colin Montgomery rock going on, but
Yeah, it's not a big deal. I don't think those are big deal. I mean, like it's definitely not Colin Montgomery. I mean, he's like if it had to do like your body had to rotate perfect, well, he had never played on the tour, and he was one of the best ball strikers out there. He probably had more top 10s and 15s and U.S. Opens than anybody. And one of my mentors always said, I judge the quality of a ball striker by, how many top 10s they have in U.S. Opens. And there's probably a lot of truth in that. So, but yeah, I don't see any. I mean, it's not like I don't see anything wrong. I see it more like Kenny Perry. I see a lot of similarities there. And Kenny Perry's not bad, but I don't. The body's not as big a deal as people make it. So, in my opinion, but. It certainly can be there's certain moves that it can make that can get you into running into some problems, but your wrist and arms are what recover everything. They're what makes either a player phenomenal, good, average, or terrible. So at the end of the day, and, relative to their eyes, but again, all that's connected. It's all the same thing. So, but any other questions out there? Body's working really good through the ball there, Jim. I mean, you got a lot of good things going on. We just need to fix that. So, if you will, just make it a goal. Send us another video, if you will. There's another player. I didn't get his on here today because I have to have it uploaded by YouTube, and I'll talk to him about that. But there's another player. He's got a really good golf swing. I think he lives maybe in Canada, but really good golf swing, doing some really good stuff within the program. He sent me a swing, and so I'm sorry I didn't get him in here. I think his name's Jeff. But I'll get you in the next time. Just if you can't upload it to YouTube, slow motion's always better if you got that. If you don't, that's fine too. We'll work with it. But I just need to see when you send in videos. Anybody that's listening, anytime you send in videos, just if you can send them in by YouTube or a link like that, like Jim just did, that's what I need. It doesn't have to be perfect video quality. I've seen so many swings. I've analyzed so many swings through video, face on and down the line. I can tell you what's going on, even when it's fuzzy. And I know that's weird, but I can. But if you send them to me like that, it's a much easier way for me to upload them and analyze them for right now. And you can always send in down the line. You can always send in putting. You can send in, and I wish people would. I know right now it's hard to do right now, but just get you a little tripod with your video cameras, or your anything. I don't care what you upload it with, but and get that. If there's wind in the deal, it's not a big deal. I don't care about all that either. Just looking at the motion. But if you want to send in putting down the line, putting face on down the line with putting, I would anybody that's in the program, send it, because so many people can learn from that. Make sure your camera's not way offline. It needs to be on the ball line. It's different than the golf swing. So the camera, when you're set up down the line on putting, it needs to be on the actual ball line. When you set up your camera down the line for the golf swing, I went on the back right elbow. So if I was, let's see here, Let me see if I can find. I don't know what they're doing here, but let's see here. Hold on 1 second. I'll show you. So I can find somebody to set up. All right. Guess nobody does set up anymore. Yeah, even right here, like you can see this. This isn't right on here though. But what I'll show you is you would take it on the elbow line. Now that's an offset camera angle right there. Here, shooting that. I don't know who that is, but it's at me and my golfers or something. I don't know, but it doesn't matter. If you get the camera, you want it right, like so. You want it directly on the. You want it on the same parallel like the railroad tracks here, but you don't want the camera right on the ball line. On this is an offset angle. It's not a very good camera angle. And then you want it on the right elbow, straight down. That's where you want your camera set up right there. And you want to make sure it's running on railroad tracks, and that the player is shooting that way, that you're not aiming way over here shooting it, that the player is aiming at that, let's say that target right there. Then you would have your camera, you'd have it, it's not perfect. Yeah, it is. Yeah, that'd be it. Right on the elbow there. It's like parallel, it's like railroad track. Now on putting, chipping, either one's fine. It's not a big deal. But on putting, I want it. I don't want it on the elbow. The one you're a lot closer. I want it on the actual ball line. And chipping would be the same. Pitching, you get wedge shots and stuff like that. Go back to the elbow. So hopefully that'll help everybody understand how to do that. Face on, really face on when you're caddy view, whatever, or not caddy view, but face on looking at it. What you want to do is you want to be about hip high. I like it hip high. Now, a lot of my videos are down on the base. It gives a better look at some angles, and if you want to keep it there, that's fine. Ground level and angle it up, I don't care. But really, around hip high is when I'm using it professionally, and not for the videos. And I'm really working with a player. Most of the time, I'll keep everything right around hip high on everything. It just gives a better. To me, that's the view I like. It's what I was trained with. There's probably a lot of different ones. The reason why you don't like it on the ball line, the camera on the ball line with a full swing, is because it's an illusion, because you're trying to look at what's going on in here, but you're actually seeing more here, so it gives you an illusion by having it that far offset really to what's going on. And you're not really, to me, I'm not looking at the club head. I'm looking at, obviously the one thing is the body, and then obviously that side of the shaft that I talk about. Those two things, and then face on, right in front of you, really right on in the center. Basically, if you were at face on, it'd be right in the center of the belt buckle and at hip high. And you just have to play with it and see how much distance you want away from it and all that, because it changes, or how much zoom. You want to make sure you can see everything face on, and you want to be able to make sure you can see everything down the line as far as zoom. Go for. But that being said, let's see, there's maybe another question here. Sounds coming. I think that's it. Unless there's any other questions. All right. Well, we will probably be back next week and do another one as well. Again, anybody wants to send, like I said, don't be afraid to send in putting videos. It doesn't have to be slow motion. It can be. If you can do it in slow motion, that's fantastic. If you can send it in YouTube format, that makes it a lot easier for me to upload the link and pull up here. Or like you can do what Jim did, you can join into the webinar and then just send it by chat, just send in a video, a link. And if that's the easiest, it's easiest for me for sure. But if you can do that, that'd be fine as well. But hope everybody has a great week and weekend coming up. And I will talk to everybody pretty soon. Y'all have a great week.